Hello, everyone. I am Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspire Show. And my guest today is Lynette Zang. And you'll see this will be a very special interview. Lynette is the Chief Market Analyst at ITM Trading, a full-service physical gold and silver dealer. In 1964, Lynette began her studies on gold and collectibles via her uncle, who was a high-end antique dealer in New York. Her father was a real estate developer in Kingston, New York. With his contacts in local commercial banking, she began her banking career at 15. She remained in commercial banking until 1986, when she shifted to investment banking with Larson Lehman American Express and became a stockbroker. Initially, she focused her attentions on the government bond market, learning the nuances of debt and interest rate moves on bond maturities. Lynette's mission is to translate financial noise into understandable language and enable educated, independent choices. All her work is fact and evidence-based, and she shares these tools openly. Lynette, thank you very much for joining me today.
That was quite an introduction. I'm very happy to be here, Claudio.
So you have a wonderful reputation in the investment circles, and your followers love you and your work. And I have to admit that this is a first for me to have a guest that officially is not involved in a business related to self-development, shamanism, energy healing, channeling, or similar activities. So I heard you talking to a younger gentleman, Jake, on a different interview, when you mentioned about a potential spiritual journey in France many, many years ago. And that, prickled my ears, and I said, I have to invite Lynette and see where the discussion will take us. So let's start with that trip to France and determine exactly when you realize that there is more to life than events unfolding chaotically.
Well, I think I always knew that there was a lot more to life than events that unfold. But we have to go back. Okay, this is spiritually inspired, so I will tell you really my whole story, because my story spiritually began when I was 4. At least that's my earliest recollection. And I knew that I was supposed to do something that had a positive impact on a lot of people. I'm 4 years old. I mean, who knew what that was? But I remember that moment very vividly in my life, and then I spent really the rest of my life looking for what that was. But, life happens, and I've always felt quite guided, even into the catastrophes. So this is going to, well, no, it won't sound strange to your audience, but I was told to open a restaurant. Never had the desire to open a restaurant. Was a waitress when I was in high school. Where this is coming from, I don't know. But I was a single mother. I was a stockbroker at Larson Lehman. And I needed to, one day one of my daughters stayed home sick from school. And my office was right around the corner. I mean, it wasn't 5 minutes away. And my mother also lived around the corner. She wasn't 5 minutes away. So I said, okay, I had a lot of appointments that day. And I said, okay, just if you need anything, call Nanny. I will be home as soon as my appointments are done. And by the time I got home, she was so sick. I mean, she really was way sicker than I thought. And the level of guilt that I felt, she couldn't have called my mother if she needed. In fact, my mother had tried to call her and she didn't answer the phone, so she assumed she just went to school because the school was right around the corner. And that's when I said, I have to figure something else out because I have to be able to be, honestly, a stay-at-home mom. I can't believe I'm talking about this. I mean, I haven't talked about this in a lot of years, but okay. I wanted to be able to be there for my children, and of course I had to support them as well. And so I didn't know what I was going to do, and then, but I was thinking about it, and I'm riding along in the car one day, and it's like, open a restaurant. Are you out of, and I actually went, are you crazy? what in the world would I want to do with a restaurant? Here I am, a stockbroker. I'm able to support my children, and you want me to go and do this. But I had to figure this out. So that's what I ended up doing. And in some ways it was successful, but it was also the first time in my life I ever knew that I could fail. And I did fail. I failed spectacularly. And that's why in that one interview you're referring to, and I said I had a lot of shame. And, and I was suicidal for about 3 years. Because I never fail. I mean, I just put my head down and plow through. And even as I was painting the walls on the restaurant, I said, I know I'm supposed to do this. I don't know why. It just didn't make any sense to me. But, you do what you're supposed to do. So I got to a point where, that story kicked in. That was kind of the aha moment, but there were many things that happened before that. But, being suicidal, I mean, I knew exactly where I was going to do it, how I was going to do it, the whole 9 yards. The only thing that kept me from it is I would not have put my children through that because I absolutely adored them. I loved them like crazy. But I didn't love myself at that point, but I did love them. So that's actually why I ended up going to France. I kind of landed, and I have a lot of different skills and talents. So I kind of landed in this one French restaurant, which is why it ended up being France, where I was doing pastries and things there for a minute because I wanted to hide. I didn't want anybody to see me. I was very vigilant. If I saw somebody that I knew coming down the street, I definitely turned the corner, went a different way. And so you can hide in a kitchen. I thought. It actually was not true, but I thought I could hide in a kitchen. At any rate, I got to a point where I either had to finish the job or I had to get healthy again for my children and myself. So, there are people there that are French in the French restaurant, and one of them said, well, my mother is coming over for the summer, and you can rent really cheap her little house in a little village outside of Lyon. And I thought, well, that's perfect, because I didn't speak French, although I love France. I'd been there before, but I thought, well, that's perfect. That'll give me just some time to be with the earth and by myself and in a beautiful setting. And then something happened, and that piece didn't work out. And I thought to myself, I still have to go. So instead of going to a little village and having a roof over my head, I went to France with very little money and bought a bike when I got there and brought this backpack. And in the backpack were all these things that I thought that I needed. Bathing suits and books and headlamps and, stuff. And I remember getting there, and this was really amazing. I bought a boy's bike. I flew into Paris. I went to Lyon. I bought a boy's bike because I figured then if somebody went by, they wouldn't know whether or not I was a girl or a boy in the tent. Because I was just, and, it wasn't like I really knew how to do this, camping and the tenting and all that, but, I figured it out. We had a few challenges, but I figured it out. So I had bought this book, A Bicycle Trip Through France or something like that, and it was on the back of my bike. And I have this backpack on, and I have everything set up, and the book fell off the back of the bike. And I was going down, it was the most beautiful tree-lined road. And the book fell off, and so I stopped the bike, and I turned around to see where it fell, and the backpack was so heavy, bam, down I go. And I'm laying there like a beach turtle on my back, and I couldn't get up because the backpack was so heavy. So I had to take it off. And if you've ever done this where you push down on your arm and then when you release it, you feel like my whole body felt like I was floating.
Yeah.
So I get myself all reset and off I go. I found the most beautiful park. And it was still the beginning of the trip. So even though I didn't have very much money, I still had a little bit of money. So I decided to set up camp in this park for the night. And I always kept my airplane tickets and passport and thing with me, but I left everything else. And I go into the village and I get a little bite to eat and I come back and my backpack had been stolen. Now, typically, if I say that, everybody goes, "Oh no." I went, "Oh, thank you, God." Because here I am carrying around all of this stuff on my back that I thought that I needed, when in reality, I went back into town, I bought another change of clothing, and I did not have that heavy backpack to lug around the rest of France with stuff that I really didn't need. And I even knew at the time, I was so grateful, but that was a huge lesson for me because I think we all do that. We carry this stuff because we think we need it or have to when we really don't. And, no matter what, I wouldn't have probably looked very good after camping, for 3 months and bathing in the streams or whatever. So I would say that was probably the first significant lesson that I realized. I still wasn't at a point where I was getting healthy, but that was a pretty significant lesson and I think an important one. I didn't know my purpose yet. That didn't come until the end. But every night when I would go to bed, I would ask God to keep me safe and to show me what I needed to see. And I promised I would not turn away. Because up until that point, I couldn't see what I needed to see. It was too painful. It was just too painful. So we didn't bring any tissues in. Oh, yes, we did. Okay, good.
No, you mentioned something very interesting there, self-love. I think we all lack, or majority of us lack the fact that we have to love ourselves before we can love the people around us. And a wise woman recently told me that you have to talk to yourself in the mirror. Might sounds crazy, but you have to ask yourself, how are you doing today? Do you feel content? Do you feel love for yourself? Do you feel love for God? So only then you can start your daily journey to do what you're supposed to do. And again, self-love is very important and we should practice that on a daily basis.
That's true. But since that period of time, you know what I ask myself? Well, I don't ask myself, actually. But when I get up in the morning, what I say, and I've done this for many years, and I think a lot of it came from that experience, is how can I be of service today? Yes. Because I feel like what that does is the universe is hearing that, how can I be of service? And then they're echoing that back to me.
Yes, it is reflective talking pretty much. When I want to solve a small problem or a bigger problem, I talk to either my wife or my son, my kids. And by just doing that, I clear my head, I clear my ideas. It's the reflective talking I mentioned, and I always find the solution.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the solutions are there. I mean, my work is really guided. There are things that pop up that I get to see and then I get to share that I don't know how I stumbled across them. Yeah. But I mean, that was that trip. That was the start. You can ask me anything you want and I'll tell you honestly. But and I knew at the end, if you it was the interview I did with Jake on I Love Prosperity. And but there's really so much more, because at the end of the trip I knew my purpose, but the reality is the first vision that came to me that I had to see didn't happen until about 3 weeks in. And I was riding through beautiful countryside, corn as far as the eye could see. The sky was a perfect robin's egg blue. I mean, it was the first day, the first time, because it wasn't like I was a big bike rider before I left, but I actually hit 60 kilometers. And it was the first time in 3 years that I remember feeling joy. First time in 3 years. And all of a sudden, the first image, which I'm not going to talk about here, but the first image that I needed to see, because it was the hardest one for me, just was like, boom, right in my face. And it really literally almost knocked me off my bike physically. And I stopped. And even though I didn't always have money for food during that trip, I always made sure that I had a pad and something to write with, a pencil or pen. And actually, I pulled that box down because to this day, I have not looked at anything that I wrote. And I was not thinking, well, I never thought when I was writing. I just wrote. So I don't really have any idea what's in there, but hopefully we'll close this week on a mountain retreat that is very, very remote, and I plan on opening that up. So I pulled that whole box down. I'm going to take it up there with me, and I'm going to write it a lot more about this trip. But what was so interesting is the images and the things that I needed to see and the things that I needed to work through only came through when I felt good. Never when I was struggling with something or, trying or, and I wasn't really trying. I was really letting go because it was the first time. I mean, we can all think about this. I actually had almost 3 months without any responsibility to any other person other than myself. And I ended up being able to communicate in French, but I needed to go to a place where I didn't know anybody and I couldn't speak the language because then what could anybody expect from me? Nothing. And that's what I needed. So I was lucky to be able to do that. And, by the end of that trip, I was ready to start healing. I can't say that I was definitely not healed, but at least I was open to seeing what I needed to see and starting to really work through that. And because of that, and if you want me to do the strawberry story, I have a lot of good stories from that period. People that didn't know me, I had nothing, I had absolutely nothing. So they didn't want anything from me. But, through the trip, I would meet a person that would let me take a shower in their house, which was really a treat, since I'm bathing in the streams, or even let me sleep in their house for a minute, or camp on their lawn, or feed me. So you will never, ever hear me say anything negative about France, ever, 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 not in my work, not anywhere, because France and the people of France really saved my life. They really did. They were so good to me, and I can't imagine that I could have gone anywhere else to get what I got from them. But it still didn't really tell me what it did. It told me my purpose, that I'm here to be of service. And that was the biggest gift because I didn't know why I was here. I had searched, I'd done everything that I'd been directed to do, as hard as it might have been, as confusing as it might have been. I did it, and then look where I ended up, a huge crash and burn. And so that was also the only time in my life, actually, that I ever lost faith. And I think that's why I struggled so much, because I always felt so guided. And I did do what I was told to do. I still do what I'm told to do, even if it doesn't make sense. I still do it. But I think, honestly, I had to get to that place in order to be humbled. Number one, I think that was a big thing, but also to understand how important service is. And that's why every day, how can I be of service? And then I think the universe echoes that back. And, I mean, I'm very grateful for my life and my children. I mean, I'm very grateful. I'm very, very, very grateful.
Yeah, thank you. That's an important question to ask, as you said. And since then, have you started on any official spiritual journey, visiting any special places over the years, or you just let yourself being guided where you were?
Well, I have not been guided to leave Arizona, but that doesn't mean that I have not been on a special journey. This whole farm that I've created is extremely magical, and even how I ended up getting it, I think was definitely guidance. But there's a lot of incredible energy on this property, and there's life. I've never lived on a property like I live on this property because every square inch is about half an acre, so it's not huge, but every square inch is filled with life and movement. And, if you were, and I'm going to tell you, I don't necessarily feel like my sister. She can take a vitamin or something like that, and about 2 seconds later, she's like, "Oh, I can really feel that." That's not who I am. I can't. And, I don't know really how to explain it. Like, you would probably step from the road onto my property and go, "Whoa, I can really feel it." But I'm really fortunate to be here. I feel like a caretaker, and my job was really just to elevate, bring this property to where it needed to be. So I don't need to go anywhere anymore. I used to think I needed to, but I've created that here with a lot of help. Like, I don't have a swimming pool. I have a swimming pond. So I get to swim. It's getting warm again. I'll be able to swim with my beautiful fish, and I have chickens and ducks and quails and dogs and cats and people but now it's spring. So I've got my baby peaches and my baby plums and my cherries and all of it. So there's wherever I go on this property is kind of like a spiritual journey. And crystals, I've got crystals all over the place.
Nice.
To
And
bring
we'll
in
come back to this discussion about your life mantra for sure.
Oh,
There is a plant medicine renaissance going on in the world for the last, almost 10 years, maybe more. Have you experienced any of this in your early years?
well, I'm sure that you know a lot more about this than I do, but again, in the guidance, a lot of what I planted happened to be superfoods because I eat mostly what comes from my property. And if I had to do that 100%, I could. It would not be a very big stretch. So I think of myself more like a nutritionally dense eater. However, it's all very medicinal, like my moringa hedge, which is probably one of my favorite foods. And I eat that raw, I eat it cooked, I use the sticks in teas and things like that, and the holy basil. So even though I don't really know about that movement, I have a tendency anyway to do a lot of things just naturally that then become I usually do things a lot sooner than a lot before it becomes popular.
Yeah, good. Do you have a spiritual teacher which is contemporary or passed away, transitioned?
No.
um,
No, I'm
recently,
sorry.
you mentioned that you are an artist. Can you
I am.
please expand on that?
Well, I think it's more like a mindset. So I'm probably one of the most creative people you'll ever meet. And I kind of have a motto, ABC, always be creating. And so as an artist, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, whether I'm doing, my work at ITM and looking at the IMF and all of this horrible, horrible, horrible stuff. or I'm cooking, or I'm out in the gardens, or I'm with someone, I'm going to approach it with an artist's eye, which is really about creativity and value. How can I bring value to this person, to this event, to this thing? So it's sharing, but there are really no problems, because if you approach whatever comes up with creativity and as an artist, you'll figure it out. So I know early in my career I had so many people say, "Oh my God, how are you going to keep doing this? Oh my God, how can?" I never worry about that, because I know I'm going to be shown what to do anyway, and I'm going to be guided to it. And I think that's a lot of the art is trusting. So I do mosaics. I mean, I don't really have time to do that, so I pour most of that energy into my work. But I kind of look at something, and this whole place it is a work of art. It is a project, an art project for me. So placing the trees and I do mosaics, and I learned how to do some stained glass because I wanted some stained glass. I like to paint, but that doesn't mean that I do things that I like. Somebody else might not like them. Doesn't really matter. But I always wanted to be an artist, and it wasn't until after that crash and burn, and then I had a house. I mean, it took a while before I could get to that point. But then I had a house, and I was trying to decorate it on a budget, and that's not a big deal for me. So I just started doing that, putting up twigs and painting and whatever. And my children would go, "Oh, God, Mom, why are you doing that? Oh, ew, ew." And so it wasn't really fun to be creative around them. But their friends would come in, and they would go, "Wow, your mom's really a good artist. Wow, your mom's really a good artist." And so I started to believe it. It was something I had always wanted, but I thought, "Oh, I'm not Van Gogh. I mean, I want to cut off my ear, for art." But actually, yeah, I am compelled. So I am an artist. Nobody recognized it in me until my daughter's friends would come over and see it. And then I started to believe it because I kept hearing it, which I thought was really nice. Because up until that point, it was like, ew.
Yeah, third-party recognition is important. And I do agree with you that putting together a garden like the one you described needs creativity and an artist's eye. That's for sure.
Yeah, we can, if you want, we can send you some pictures. It's really quite magnificent.
And because we talk about nature, how important do you think it's for all of us to reconnect with nature and listen to also to the remaining elders of the indigenous communities that the Western civilization tries so hard to decimate?
Yeah, I actually think that's really, really critical because nature is what gives us everything. I mean, it feeds our soul, it feeds our bodies, it feeds our minds. And I do spend a lot of time. And when I'm stressed, especially, you have to understand in my work, it's translating that financial noise, but I've got to tell you, there's a war that's going on, and it's been going on for a really long time. And I'm a soldier. I'm a soldier in that war. And so most of my time is spent reading these documents and understanding the manipulations and all of that. It's very ugly, ugly, nasty stuff. And so I need to what feeds me is going out and feeding the fish and sitting in the chicken coop and letting the chickens, kind of climb all over me and going out and talking to my baby peaches. And so that's all about nature. And the property, which I won't tell you where it is, but I will tell you it's remote. This mountain property, it's up 7,200 feet, so it's nice and high. And I had to get a high vehicle in order to access it. So it's very, very, very remote, and I can't wait to actually get to go and enjoy that and hike in the mountains and, and really be with nature. There are a number of reasons. I bought it to be a bug out house, but also because I need that. Going back to that trip in France, after you sleep on the ground for 3 months, number one, it's amazing how comfortable the ground is once you get used to it, And it took me about a week or more, actually, to feel comfortable in a bed and with a roof over my head. It was nice when it was like one night here and then one night there, but I think it was sleeping on the ground every night, and I always kept the pad by me, so when I woke up in the morning, if I had a thought or I had a dream, then I would thank God for protecting me, and then I would write. So I think being out in nature and then listening to those indigenous people that they know the spirit, they know the earth speaks to them. Maybe when I'm up in the mountains, I'm going to hear that signal louder, but I'm planning on spending a lot of time by myself up there for that very purpose.
Yeah, to them, every rock has a spirit, its own spirit. Every tree has its own spirit.
Absolutely.
But we look at them as stones and, hardwood or something which we can cut down and use it as a board. That's sad.
One of the policies that I've had as I was developing this property is not to throw or waste anything. So any of the roots, the tree, the trunks that had been cut off and so that they were dug out, no, I kept it on the property and we've utilized it. Put a sink in one. The chickens love them for roosting. Same thing with the rocks and the stones that we found on the property, because there were obviously areas that needed to be cleaned up, and I didn't want to. No, they belong on that property. They've been there for many, many years. That's where they need to be. So they're cherished, they're loved, they're cleaned, and they're reused.
Yeah, very nice. Thank you. If you have to come back, reincarnate, what you would like to be back as, or?
Well, I'm kind of thinking this might be my last life, but but maybe not. I don't know. Whatever the universe has planned for me, I'm game. I promise to show up and do the work. What would I like to come back as? Wow, I never even thought about that.
It's fine. We can
I don't
come
know.
back to that later. So let's talk
Okay.
about your life mantra, please.
Well, the one that you're referring to is the
Yes.
food, water, energy, security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter, which I believe are things that we all need, regardless of what is happening, in order to have, a reasonable standard of living. And numerologically speaking, I'm an 8, which would make sense for me to gravitate toward money. And so, but I have a different view of money than probably anybody else you'll ever talk to, simply because of what I do for a living and how deeply I actually understand it. But there's been a war that's been going on for our minds and our souls forever. And the monetary system, this is not the first time that it's happened, but as an artist, I see patterns, right? And the monetary system that we're used to is resetting into a new system because they've really used up all the tools that they built in for it. And what they have in mind for us takes us back more like serfdom. There'll be kings and there'll be the land barons and there'll be the serfs. So the World Economic Forum is talking about you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, except that wealth never disappears. It merely shifts location. And so the goal and what's been happening, this isn't something that's going to happen, it's something that's been happening right along, is that people's wealth, their time, which is the greatest wealth that we have, is our time. And money is supposed to be a measure of our time and our value and our worth. And the current system is specifically designed for inflation, so that all of that, your payment for your labor and your work, okay, if you get your paycheck today and you spend it today, then there's no impact on it. But if you get your paycheck today and you try and save it for future use, you are not getting paid what you were originally for your labor. And so this is a huge theft. So my mantra was it really is about being as independent and self-sufficient as possible. Community is a huge key in that, because no one person can do absolutely everything. And we all have different skill sets and we all have different gifts. And so for those of us that can come together in community to get through this, because we all saw what happened last March and April with the grocery store shelves going bare. And, you talk about the health and you talk about the food. I mean, the food that you get at the grocery store, even if it's marked organic, well, it's at least a month old. So how much nutritional value does that really have? And I was eating organic before it became popular, and those apples looked like you picked them off a tree with blemishes, right?
Yep.
But today, they're perfect. There's no blemishes on that produce. Well, that's not true. In nature, that's not true. And when March and April hit, because I had already been preparing and I had these magnificent gardens, not only was I able to take care of myself and the people around me that I love, but my neighbors, and we donate food. And so, I think it's critically important to live by that mantra so that you are as independent and self-sufficient, and therefore you have more choices. You have a lot more choices. If you are simply dependent upon the system that the powers that be have created for you, well, you're really sick and unhealthy, right? Because there's no nutritional value in the food. And it's even worse than that. There's a lot of stuff in the food that actually hurts you. And it makes it harder to think clearly. And certainly, we don't even realize how bad we feel until we feel good.
Exactly.
I once knew this person, and I bet you we all know this person, who had diabetes, prostate cancer, neuropathy, I don't know, like 6 different things.
Yeah.
And I went, wow, you're really sick. And he looked at me like I was crazy, because he's my age, right? And I'm 66. And he goes, you think I'm sick? I said, well, you have this, and this. Yeah, I think you're really sick. And the problem with it was, and what bothered me so much, is that every single medical thing that he knew that he had wrong was easy enough to fix by food and exercise.
Yeah.
And when I made that suggestion, it's like, oh, but I like this. And ooh, who wants to do that? And I thought, that's the problem, that's what has been set up for people, is they commoditize the food, pull all the nutrition out. They just want you to eat this garbage and this poison. So yeah, I like to eat the food that I grow because I know the water, it's all structured water. We create our own dirt, we compost, we've got all the waste from the chickens and the ducks and the fish, and I know what goes into every single thing, and I know the love and the energy and the care that goes into the food. So that's what I like to eat. Not saying I don't.
Yeah.
Pardon?
You just mentioned 2 keywords: structured water. Can you please develop on that? Because I write about water. I'm working on an anthology
Oh,
about water. It's called Love Letters to Water. So I'm very deep into water.
well, you should be deep into water. Everybody should be deep into water. And as I was developing everything, see, there you go. This is actually tea from that water with all sorts of ashwagandha and good stuff in it, ginger and all that good stuff. But yeah, when I was putting the farm together and I was researching water, and here I'm on city water. Up north, no, I'm on well water with tanks and all of that. But here I'm on city water, and I knew I didn't really want to drink it, bathe in it, and certainly feed it to my animals, and my fruit and my food that I was then going to eat. So I just started researching, and I found, I don't remember the name because it's been so long, but a man in Cottonwood, Arizona, that developed this device that you put on right where the water comes onto the property, and it runs through a structured water filter that cleans it and then makes it as if it's like fresh from a running brook down the mountain.
Yeah.
So when I laid everything in, all the food quality, copper pipes and things like that. I mean, it's very important that you're conscious about what you're putting in your body on every single level. I never get to talk about this. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Seriously, I never get to talk about this. And it's important, and it's a big part of everything that I do. So, yeah. So I get to drink structured water, bathe in it, give it to my animal. And here's something else. This was a big shocker for me. I was going through, I get magazines from Grow Organic and, these kinds of places. And I'm going through them one day, and it said something about a lead-free hose. And I went, why would they have to talk about a lead-free hose unless there was lead in most of the hoses that are out there?
Right.
How could they put lead in hoses when they know how bad that is for you? And I had bought all these hoses from, I put spigots in around everything because we're doing the gardens. And I got these hoses from Home Depot, not thinking. And when I found out that there could have been lead in there, I took all these hoses and I went back to Home Depot and I said, I said, are there lead in these hoses? And I talked to a manager and he goes, well, yes. I said, well, why isn't that like really known? You have a lead-free hose, you have a leaded hose. You let people make an educated choice. He says, that's not my job. He said, it is buyer beware. That's the last time I went to Home Depot. Okay. And I know I'm not supposed to say any individual names, but it really ticked me off that they would be so cavalier with our health that they would be, you buy a hose, you're not thinking about is there lead in this hose or not, but the kids will run through the water. If you're trying to do something good by having a garden, then, you're putting lead into the water, into the food that you're then going to consume. That's horrendous. I mean, that's beyond horrendous. So, yeah, that's
Yeah, I
personal.
mean, I discovered over the years that a nice person, the moment he joins a corporation, he is bound by those corporation's rules and he will behave in that way, even if it's against common sense, against, any decent decision towards his fellow human beings. And it's sad, it happens in the banking industry especially, and in oil and gas, and pretty much everywhere. We kind of transform ourselves, we morph into that corporation, in what that corporation wants us to become and behave, and that's sad.
Well, I think, having lived in the corporate world, it didn't happen for me. I mean, when I was at Shearson, I went to Shearson because they had, at the time, the best training program on the street. And that's what I wanted. I wanted the best. They did not teach me how to read the technical language of the markets. They did not teach me What they taught me was how to sell an intangible product. That's what they taught me. 2.5 years, invaluable, I'll say, invaluable. I'm very grateful. But I remember when I first started like talking to clients, and it was a very long training program. I talked to clients way before 2.5 years. They kind of broke it up. But I was there, let's see, they sent me, so about 6 or 8 weeks was the first big chunk after I got my Series 7. And then when I came back, they said, well, here's an idea to sell all your clients on, your new clients. You're going to start calling these people and all of that. All right, they're supposed to know what they're doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm new. What do I know? Right? So I did what they told me to do for about a minute. But only about a minute, because number one, because I didn't understand it, it did not feel comfortable to me. And then number two, when it went south, which didn't take very long to go south, and I called them up and I said, what do I do now? What do I do now? I was kind of like out there on my own. And I realized that that was not what people were hiring me for. They were hiring me to protect them and to build their wealth. Therefore, I really needed to understand this. That's why I went to government bonds, because I figured while I'm learning, number one, it's a government bond. They can create the money to pay you back. So I figured I could not hurt anybody while I was learning. But yeah, I used to make sure and go over all the prospectuses so that people knew the good, the bad, the ugly, what it was. I made sure I understood it. That's why I translate the financial noise. That's why I do as much digging as I do. So I don't think that that's a requirement. I think that that's a choice.
Yeah.
You know, that people make, and I'm a person of integrity, so I can't do something. I can't tell you to do something that I'm not going to do myself.
Yes, so true. Lynette, let's go deeper into what ITM is doing and how you can help people to preserve their wealth. And this will be new for my viewers, because usually they don't get this type of information, and I think it's important to get it from the source and from someone as ethical as you are.
Thank you, because I, again, in the guided and became that stockbroker. And then one day, as I was looking through, I came across what's called non-dollar denominated bonds. And those are just bonds that are in different currencies. And at that time, this was in the 80s, at Shearson, you could call up and talk to the head of the department. And so I spent the next year and a half or so every morning talking to the head of currency trading. And then at night I'd go home and I'd study. Well, I started to see patterns. And so from those repeatable patterns, I developed a strategy. Now, I went to ITM in 2002 after the different formulas told me that we were now at the end stage of the current currency's life cycle. And I brought my strategy with me because it was one that I was executing for myself. We are in a battle right now, but I can tell you 100 bazillion%, the dollar is going away. It has been going away since the day you were born. It is called fiat money. It is government-based money. And by design, when you read all the documents when they were laying out this whole system back in the early 1900s, and this has been tried so many times before anyway, they know that people do not understand inflation. I'm sorry I'm going off on a little tangent, but you need a little bit of background. But they knew that they knew two key things. Number one, people marry the legal money of the state. So how can the dollar go away? We've always had the dollar, right? And number two, they knew that people do not understand inflation, and that inflation causes what's called nominal confusion. So if you had a $20 bill 10 years ago and you have a $20 bill today, nominally, they are identical. They're both $20 bills. Oh, you got $20. But what that $20 bill would buy you 10 years ago, 5 years ago, a year ago, a month ago, and what it will buy you today is vastly different. So this kind of monetary system for governments, some of your people may have heard about the inflation tax, because they get to reduce the look at what's happening with real estate. You sell a house, you're going to pay, if you don't roll it over or whatever, you're going to pay tax on the inflation. It's really quite a brilliant scheme. But the government does not need to go through legislation, and so that's an invisible tax on your wealth. For corporations, and we hear all about the income and wealth inequality, well, yeah, because that's the way the system was designed. If you are a normal person or an average worker, in 1971, the average wage was $9,500, and a family of four could live on that with one wage earner. I'm not saying they were super wealthy, but they could manage with one wage earner, $9,500. Today, I think the average wage is $48,000. So on the outside, nominal confusion, right? You go, well, I'd much rather have $48,000 than $9,500. But you have to have two wage earners. And guess what? If you're making $150,000 a year between two people, you got that stimulus check, didn't you?
Yep.
So what's that tell you about the value of the currency? But so for corporations, since inflation is gauged upon the products that they sell, in reality, they are paying you less and less and less. And that's why they can pay the CEOs and the shareholders and everybody else that's up at that top upper echelon more and more and more. So for them to say they're fighting it is garbage. But to go back to your question, I'm sorry. Based upon those repeatable, this is why the mantra is important, because that's the only way you're really going to be able to protect yourself. But I came to ITM. I have been there since 2002 and have been really instrumental in even evolving the company. And we all work with a strategy that I developed based on those repeatable patterns for myself. And of course, everybody there, we've been together for a long time. And very brilliant minds there. So taking my base strategy, we just make it better and better and better. And we customize the strategies because your circumstance, your goals, what you have to work with are going to be different than mine. So it's the same basic strategy. And frankly, it's based on good money that holds its value over time, which are gold and silver. But gold is the primary currency metal. Silver is the secondary currency metal. Gold is, you need both. They have different functions. You need both. But gold is what they revalue and reset the currency against, because they take something that has no intrinsic value, right? Those dollar bills, they're debt instruments. You can look at the top of the bill. It says Federal Reserve note. A note is a debt instrument. And it has only value inside of the financial system as a tool of barter. That's its value. Yep. And they revalue it against gold money, which is all intrinsic value because it's used across the entire global economic system. And it does not need a government to say that it's money. It's been money for 6,000 years. And it's maintained its purchasing power. And they can manipulate anything. So anything can happen on a short-term basis. But it's maintained its purchasing power for 6,000 years. So that whenever you got paid for it, and however long you held it, nominal prices might go up, but so does gold. It was $20 in 1900. It's $1,745 today, and still severely undervalued because a rising gold price is an indication of a failing currency. Yes. And they don't want you to know that because you'd make different choices like I have. I've made a lot of different choices.
Yes. And do you think that the August 2021 could be the day when the dollar will go away? Is too short for it
They're
to
not
go
done
away?
yet. No, they're setting up the new system, which is digital, and they want to digitize everything. And look at China, They've digitized their currency. They're the first government to come out with it, and it's really a way. If you read the documents from the IMF and even the Federal Reserve, et cetera, we're going to go to a central bank, a digital currency. So the cryptocurrencies that are out there, I don't know which ones are going to survive, but those were brought out to get us used to it for sure. And if you have everything inside of their fiat money system, then that's going away. August 2021, no, they're not ready yet. The central bank digital currencies aren't ready yet. So I think, so I'm grateful because I've been preparing for a long time, and I'm more prepared than anybody I know, and I still don't feel like I have enough, right? So I'm grateful that I would like them to postpone it, frankly, as long as possible. I think a more likely, timing is the biggest challenge of any technician. I can tell you what's most likely to happen, but it's kind of hard for me to say it'll be Tuesday morning at 8:35.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is because it's the 50-year anniversary since Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. That's why.
Well, and we are in the place where it is definitely, officially, it has 3 cents worth of purchasing power out of that original dollar. And that's official according to the Federal Reserve. Oh. So that means that it's much, much worse than that. And I don't think it's dead. The system died in 2008. That's when it really died. It was just put on life support. All of these experiments, none of them work. They can't remove the punch bowl. They've got the markets, and the next place are the people, but they've got the markets addicted to this free money, right? Interest rates where they are, interest rates are supposed to indicate the credit worthiness and the value of the money in the future. You got it at zero. The whole world pretty much is anchored at zero. So what does that tell you? What's the value of money in the future? Zero. A big fat zero. So you need to have real money that is absolutely outside of the system, and this is so key, runs no counterparty risk, because the whole system is all set up on contracts, and contracts are only as good as the counterparty to that contract. Yeah. And what are we told? What supports the dollar is the full faith and credit of the government.
Or people with guns.
They have those guns. Yeah. Look at Venezuela, right?
Yeah.
They're in a hyperinflationary event. They've now had 2 currency resets. The first one, I think they reset against gold. It went up like 3.5 million% overnight. Because the currency, they officially devalued the currency 99.9%. And the one that they just did like a couple weeks ago, I think overnight, I'd have to check and see where we're at now, but that overnight revaluation was something like 1.579 million%.
Wow.
Okay. Now, what do you want? You want bolivars? They have more value as napkins for an empanada than they do as a tool of barter.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes.
So, but if you have gold and you have silver, 90% of the population there is in abject poverty. Globally, on average, 80% of the population during these kinds of transitions, lots of data on it, ends up in abject poverty. I wouldn't want any of your viewers to be, I don't want anybody, frankly, to be in that category. That's a big motivation for me and why I do this work. I've been given many gifts. I was told I was supposed to have a positive impact on a lot of people. I didn't know where that was, but I was told that we didn't get to that story. Maybe we'll do it another time, how I knew that this was it. But I was told this is what we've been preparing you for. And I've been prepared. This is through fire. Wow. Definitely through fire.
Lynette, let's assume for a moment that you are offered and you accept the U.S. Secretary of Treasury position. What will you do first? Please use your creativity.
Oh my God. I would never accept that job because you have to be a sociopath. And I'm not being,
Yeah.
but you have to be a sociopath when you operate at that level because you cannot care that the choices that you make have a really negative impact on a lot of people. But there are a lot of things that I would change. But hey, Janet Yellen, who used to be head of the Fed, is now head of the Treasury. Perfect. She's just straddling both worlds. And don't worry, guys, they're going to, if you haven't heard this before, you will. Universal Basic Income, UBI, is on its way so that consumers can continue to consume, and that will send us into the hyperinflationary event. That's why I don't think it's going to be this summer, because we haven't entered that event yet. But I mean, we're on the way, but there's only one way to fight deflation. When prices implode, stock markets go down, real estate markets go down, et cetera, and that's with inflation. So what's hyper deflation? Well, we saw that last March, right? Markets went boom, down like, I don't know, 63, 68% in a heartbeat. And how did they solve it? Hyperinflation. More money than they did the whole time since 2008. A quarter of all the money that was created in 2020. I mean, there you go. Now, the fact that it hasn't trickled through, once you put money into people's hands and they feel confident that that money will come every month, yes, indeed, they will spend.
Yes, and another aspect is people they don't want to go back to work. I mean, Mike Maloney was explaining the other day that he had people working on his ranch in Puerto Rico, and he tried to pay them legally and pay taxes on their salaries. The moment they heard that, they all gave up because they're getting the UBI, and they couldn't get that if Mike will have paid them, a fair salary. So now he has to go and either pay them on like cash or find someone else. It's very, very strange time we live in.
Or I don't know what a concept. Maybe pay them what their true value. I actually employ a number of people, and I like Mike Maloney, and I think his work is great. But I also think that it's all about the value that we bring, and then we really are supposed to share our gifts. So I'm not saying I share everything that I produce, but I try and be more than fair. I want everybody to have a reasonable wage, and plus they get to harvest and do all sorts of other stuff. But I think if he paid them enough that they wouldn't feel like that, that might be a different story. And they might even fall in love with him. And I don't know, what a concept. Give him their heart, which I think is something that I'm fortunate enough to be surrounded by people that really love me and care about me.
Yes, we all need this type of people around us, because otherwise we won't be able to thrive, for sure.
Right. And when, like I tell people when they first come in, like Edgar is sitting here, and he's been here now 4 months, right? Wherever you start is where you start. And what you really need to do is, what is your dream? Here is my dream. How can they come together and fit together? So now we're moving forward energetically and in every single way, in a much more powerful position. Because you can buy somebody's time. He pays them enough. He buys them their time. But you can't buy somebody's heart. So you have to give that first, and you have to be open to receiving that. And that's what I've done here with everybody that's part of my team.
So beautiful. Lynette, we are approaching the end of the interview. I want to thank you again, and I'm very grateful for you accepting my invitation. Any final words?
Well, I think everybody needs to make sure that they are well protected, and that mantra: food, water, energy security, barterability, wealth preservation. And the wealth preservation of barterability are really done most easily with gold and silver. Community is key. key, as well as shelter. That's the whole mantra. And we love human contact. So they can reach us at ITM at 888-696-4653. And you need to start a conversation, and please don't ignore this. Please don't ignore this. This is so important. And I think you probably have the links to my YouTube channel.
Yes, we'll do that. And that's why I wanted to start this conversation, because I wanted to expose my viewers to this type of information. Is very important. I've been working on my own protection for a while now, so I know how it is to do it on overnight. Is not easy. You need time to build it up. So that's why I'm grateful that you accepted. And
I was happy to. I was excited because I get to talk about things I don't usually get to talk about.
Yes, thank you. And to my viewers, thank you for watching. Share it, like it. You can support me on my Patreon account, patreon.com/Claudiu Murgan. Get a free copy of my first book, The Decadence of Our Souls, if you visit my website. And until next time, love and gratitude.